The Growing Destinations podcast is brought to you by Experience Rochester. From live music and local breweries to unforgettable dining, events, arts, and outdoor experiences, Rochester, Minnesota is full of energy, creativity, and surprises people don't always expect. This is Rochester Really. Learn more at experiencerochestermn.com.
I knew what had happened before the media knew. And of course, when you get that kind of information, you're just like devastated. It was like I went out of body. It was like losing a family member. Shocking. Couldn't believe it. And so I was ruined for the rest of the day.
Welcome to the Growing Destinations podcast, your source for conversations about the ideas, people, and strategies shaping the future of destination development and community growth. I'm your host, Bill Von Bank. We're at the Mayo Civic Center in Rochester, Minnesota for a very special occasion as we celebrate the 100th episode of the Growing Destinations podcast with a live audience. And when we launched this podcast, the goal was simple: to explore how people, places, and ideas come together to create vibrant communities. Over the past 99 episodes, we've had conversations with leaders in tourism, business, arts, sports, media, government, authors, and economic development, all with one common thread: understanding what makes destinations thrive. For our 100th episode, it seemed only fitting to feature someone whose work helped shape one of the most influential musical legacies of our time. Our guest today is Matt Fink, known to millions around the world as Dr. Fink of Prince and the Revolution. As keyboardist for one of the most iconic bands in music history, he helped create music that continues to inspire audiences across generations and around the world. Today we talk about his journey into music, how he met Prince, what it was like to be part of the revolution during the Purple Rain era, the friendships and experiences that shaped those remarkable years, the lasting legacy of Prince, and why music and culture continue to play such an important role in building strong communities. Matt, Dr. Fink, welcome to the Growing Destinations podcast.
It's my pleasure to be here today. Thank you.
And you're in your scrubs.
Yes, I am.
Before we knew you, though, as Dr. Fink, who was Matt Fink and what drew you to music?
Well, I have to thank my parents for that because, I come from a family that both my parents were in the acting field, actually, and music, but primarily more actors than musicians. But they brought me into theater as a kid and music, and my brother as well, and he was older than me by a couple of years, and they started him with piano lessons, and then they asked me later if I wanted to take a shot at that, and I said, sure. I was about 6, and I've had private instruction starting at 6 all the way up through my senior year of high school with several different teachers. So that's how I got into it, because of them. They inspired me. I stuck with it. It's a lot of people don't, but I really enjoyed it. So although, in the beginning I was not sure, because when you're a kid, you want to just go out and play all the time, as opposed to Mozart, whose father cracked the whip and they didn't have any TV or radio or video games. So no distractions for guys like him. But that's how I got my start.
Was there a moment when you realized music was more than a hobby and would become your career?
Yeah, I'd say even by the time I was about 10 years old, I listened to this album that I purchased, which was called Switched on Bach. I was playing classical music, by that time, and it was synthesizer music. It was all done by synthesizer by Walter Carlos back in the day, and it blew my mind. I thought, wow, this new sound is amazing. And it was at that time that I thought that I might want to be into that. Of course, the Beatles inspired me when I was 6 years old. When I saw them on Ed Sullivan too, that really made a big mark on me.
What was the Minneapolis music scene like when you were coming up as a young musician? Because you grew up in the Minneapolis area.
Yes. It became more and more vibrant, but, there were a few groups that gained national attention out of Minnesota. Obviously, Bob Dylan, who was in Minneapolis performing before he moved to New York. And of course, we all know he grew up in northern Minnesota. And then, if everybody remembers the Trashmen with this "Bird is the Word," they were from here. That was like a funny novelty song. There was a small record label called Soma Records, and that had several artists that were signed to it. And one of the people that was in one of those bands later became Prince's first manager, Owen Husney. So there was a fairly vibrant scene in those days, in the 60s. A lot of cover bands, obviously. I'm trying to remember some other groups that were signed to record deals. A group called Kane. They were like about the mid-'70s. But then once Prince blew the doors open in the 80s, that more and more people were recognized for the so-called Minneapolis sound at that time.
How did you first meet Prince?
I met him because the drummer, the future drummer of the Revolution, Bobby Z/Rivkin, I knew him. We grew up in the same suburb. He was a couple years older than me, but our parents knew each other. And I met Bobby, I think the first time I met him, I was 6 years old. But I didn't really see him a whole lot throughout my childhood. But in high school, we got to know each other a little better. And then we were both aware of each other's groups that we were playing with. So we'd go see each other perform. And then one night he came out to see me play. And he had been working for Prince's first manager. And Bobby's older brother, David, was one of Prince's first producers that created the demo, Bobby's brother, David. And so he brought me Prince's demo out one night to listen to out in his car. And I just listened to it. And I said, wow, this is amazing. Who is it? And he said, it's this kid named Prince. He's the same age as you. I go, really? Who's the band behind him? He said, well, there's no band. It's all him in the studio performing and singing and doing all the instruments. I go, you got to be kidding. And he's like 18 years old. He goes, yeah. So that really impressed me. And I just said to Bobby, I said, well, what's going to happen with him? And he said, well, his manager, who I'm like an assistant to at this time, is trying to get him a record deal with a major label. And I said, well, that sounds exciting. If anything happens, let me know, because I'd like to meet him and possibly play with him at some point. And Bobby said, okay. So about a year and a half later, after he got his record deal, I knew that had happened. And I harassed his manager incessantly to get me an audition for the band.
How was the audition?
It was okay. It was good.
Well, you obviously
little nerve-wracking. Prince had this very mischievous sense of humor, and I walked in and I was introduced to him, and then he asked me if I had learned a specific song on the album, which was called So Blue, off the first album. I thought I was supposed to learn the single Soft and Wet and one other song, and I said, no, I didn't work on So Blue. I'm sorry, I didn't work on that at all. And he said, well, don't worry about it. There's no keyboards on that song anyway. And then he laughed to break the ice. And that was it. But he wanted to just jam for like an hour or more before we even played anything, any of the songs. He was totally into that, into the jamming.
Did you realize right up front that he was just a musical genius or someone special?
Oh, yeah, no question. Because when I purchased the first album, before I ever auditioned for him, and I listened to it, just the opening piece where he's singing completely a cappella, and it's just him layering harmonies with that opening number on the album, was just amazing to me. I never heard anything like it. All in falsetto, very complex harmonies. It was definitely genius work from somebody at that age. So I thought to myself, I really want to be a part of his thing.
Well, you became a part of the thing, and then Purple Rain hit.
Yeah.
Did that feel like the biggest game changer in your life?
Yes and no. I mean, obviously the biggest game changer too was just to be in his band. I just wanted to be with a group that had a record deal with a major label, playing around for live audiences, and we were already achieving that at that time. Purple Rain took what we were doing to another level. By the time we got to the 1999 album, that album was double platinum, which in turn helped him get that Purple Rain deal happening. And that was an extremely risky venture, obviously. The record label was totally afraid of it and didn't really want to do it. They said, no, we're not going to fund this.
The movie?
Yeah, they didn't want to fund it. He wanted to, get them to do it, and they were afraid of it because they weren't sure if he was ready. He didn't have any acting experience, really, but neither did Elvis, so that was his argument. So he said, what are you talking about? All these other rock stars have done movies. Why not me? But I remember at the end of the 1999 tour, I was having breakfast in whatever hotel we were in at the time, and he sat me down and told me his plans to do this movie and asked me if I was down to do it. And I said, absolutely, but good luck. I said, I don't know if they're going to go for it, but you could certainly try. I mean, I even had my doubts because I knew he had a great sense of humor, great personality, and thought he could pull it off. But who knows? It's an extremely risky venture to try to do something like that.
When did you realize it would become a cultural phenomenon?
Probably after it premiered and the reviews were in, because you just don't know. It's like you're like on pins and needles, hoping that it'll succeed. So you just don't really know. And then at that point, but I mean, I knew it was going to be amazing. I mean, I obviously got to see some rough cuts of it before the final premiere happened, but and knew that the music was great. But you just don't know.
What was it like to suddenly find yourselves on the world's biggest stage?
Scary, because it's like, oh no, what are we going to do after this? Can we keep the momentum going? Prince knew that too. He knows that, when you're peaking like that and then your next project, you got to, how are you going to top it, or should you even try to top it? Obviously he didn't. The next album, Around the World in a Day, was already in the can before we even went on tour. That's how prolific he was. Of course, he told us he was going to take a 2-year break after doing the tour, and he decided not to tour Europe or Japan or Australia, and I was disappointed by that. I said, "What do you mean you're not going to bring this to the rest of the planet?" And he says, "No, I'm not interested in that now." He wanted to move on, so he said, "You're all going to get 2 years off to do whatever you want. You can do solo records, you can take a vacation, you can produce other artists, you can do whatever you want." I said, well, okay. I couldn't talk him out of it either. I tried. But within 3 months, he was like, okay, we're going on the road again. Oh, we're putting out Around the World in a Day. He knew full well what he was up to. He just didn't want to reveal that he was moving to the next phase.
How much interaction at that time did you have with Prince? Did you talk to him daily?
Well, not daily, but at rehearsals and at times, when I needed to ask him something or he needed to talk to me. But yeah, but I would say that after the Purple Rain period, he became a little bit more separated from the group. He wasn't as social with us. But prior to that, much more, yeah.
How about with the rest of the band? What was your relationship like?
It was good. I had a great relationship with everybody.
When you're performing in arenas and traveling around the world together, you become more than coworkers. What was the bond like?
It becomes a family.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you're with each other, practically 24/7. So it becomes very close. And just like anything, there can be a few things where people rub each other the wrong way, but it wasn't like really major. Nothing major would happen. And Prince was, he was such a perfectionist that sometimes you'd get, into a bit of a row with him over something too.
Was there a moment when you stepped back and thought, this is like anything I've ever imagined?
All the time. I had to keep pinching myself. back in the day, the Beatles, if you watched Hard Day's Night, John Lennon says, to the toppermost, to the poppermost, to the band, he's always trying to raise them up. And Prince would do the same thing. He'd say, so how does it feel to be in the greatest rock and roll band in the world? Right before a show. He'd say something like that. And I'd look at him and I'd go, I thought the Rolling Stones were the greatest rock and roll. No, they're not anymore.
A way to prop you up and maybe give you the nervous energy.
Yeah. I don't know if I fully believed it. I thought, we're definitely in the top 10, but at the time, I'm one of those people, I'm more of a realist.
What's one memory from that era that perfectly captures what life in the Revolution was really like?
Well, you get to that level when you're on a tour like that, and it's very first class all the way. Your accommodations are always the nicest. The travel was the nicest. Prince had a personal chef on the road with us who cooked for everybody. So after a show, there was a meal waiting in the room that was, homemade. So we were spoiled. It definitely got spoiled on that tour, no question.
We were out to dinner last night with some friends from the community, and we talked a lot about life on the road and some of the other musicians or celebrities that you ran into. Are there any one or two stories you can share about who you met and a few fun stories around the world you've traveled with Prince and the Revolution?
One time when we were playing at the LA Forum in Los Angeles, I was backstage after the show, and Quincy Jones was there, and he walked up to me and started just chatting with me. And of course, I'm fanboying like crazy because it's Quincy Jones, but I tried to, not act too nervous. And he says, "So Doc, do you like Rudolph's barbecue?" And I go, "Yeah, you know about Rudolph's barbecue in Minneapolis?" Because this was a haunt of Prince's and the bands. We'd go there all the time after being out at clubs or something. Unfortunately, it's not there anymore, but it was one of the best barbecue joints in town. He said, "Man, I just love Rudolph's, and I take it home on the plane with me whenever I'm in town." And I go, "You're kidding me." He goes, "No, I just love Rudolph's." And then so after that conversation, fast forward, this was 1985, fast forward to 1988, and Quincy Jones and his engineer, Bruce Sweden, who started out in Minneapolis and did all the Michael Jackson stuff, they came out to Paisley Park for the dress rehearsals for the Love Sexy tour. And him and Bruce Sweden sat right behind me on stage to watch the performance of the rehearsal. And I'm like, oh my God, Quincy Jones is behind me watching me play. I got to be on top of my game. And yeah, that was nerve-wracking a little bit, but I did okay. I was prepared.
I mean, it's 40-year career, so you've done great. And how long did you perform with Prince from? Were you the first band member?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, late 78 through 1990. Almost 12 years.
Good run.
Yeah.
Well, I hate to take this hard turn, but I'm going to. Where were you when you learned Prince had passed away?
I was at my office working at this company. I just had started working for them in January of that year. This is April of 2016. I was working for a music-oriented company, business-oriented company. We were trying to develop a new music streaming service catering strictly to hip-hop artists and a record label and stuff like that. And I was in my office, and I get a phone call from a friend who lived in Chanhassen to tell me that they had found a body at Paisley Park. And I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "They don't know who it is yet. I just wanted to give you a heads up." I go, "It's not Prince, is it?" And he goes, "We don't know." And I go, "Okay, well, let me know what's going on." Because the news hadn't reported anything yet. And he had like inside information because he was friends with the sheriff there. And about 20 minutes later, I get a call confirming it was Prince. So I knew what had happened before the media knew. And of course, when you get that kind of information, you're just like devastated. It was like I went out of body. It was like losing a family member. Shocking. Couldn't believe it. And so I was ruined for the rest of the day. I tried to go, a couple of my coworkers wanted me to go to lunch with them, and they knew what had happened. By then it was being reported. I said, okay, I'll sit there, but I can't eat. And then after that, I went home. So it was pretty rough. And at the time, I was playing with another group that I had been performing with for a few years called the Purple Experience, which was like a Prince music group. And we had a show in Chicago the following evening, and the band wanted to cancel the show. And I said, no, we can't cancel. They said, no, we really called the booking agent and the theater. We really don't want to do this. So I tried to get out of it on behalf of the band, and they said, absolutely not. You signed a contract. Booking agent said you can't do it. The theater said no, because it was sold out. So we were forced to play the show, and as it turns out, the audience was like really receptive to us anyway. So they really wanted to. But I was assaulted by the media as soon as I landed in Chicago. You know, cameras were on me, and CNN was calling me, and everything. I was seeing myself on screens in the airport. I mean, it was just crazy.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was surreal.
10 years later, following his death, what do you think people most need to understand about Prince's legacy?
Well, just that he was a one of a kind. You know, he's, you know how they say there'll never be another like him. You know, everybody's an individual. Obviously, we all have our strengths and weaknesses and whatever. But he was one of those artists that definitely is up there with the greats of all time. His dedication to the craft, his inspiration. He was channeling the universe, you know, the muse of whatever was flowing through him. He was one of those lucky people. Definitely had the talent and all that, but he was definitely tapped into something that not everybody is blessed with. And that's all I can say. He was like, I liken him to a modern day Mozart. We were talking about this yesterday as well, how Mozart could hear the music in his head and write down all the parts individually while he's playing billiards or something, you know, which was depicted in the movie. And Prince was like that. His ability to hear the part and then play it in one take, whether it was on guitar, piano, bass, or drums. He could hear the whole song in his head, lay down the drums first, hearing the song around the drums, and then layer it as he went. It was absolutely amazing. I watched him work in the studio that way.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Prince and the Revolution helped put Minneapolis on the world stage. What did that mean for Minnesota's identity?
Well, it definitely put us more on the map for sure. It put the spotlight on us and in the music industry. And then a lot of artists moved to Minneapolis because of that. It also inspired a lot of younger people. And I get that all the time. I run into musicians all the time that tell me, hey, if it wasn't for you, or if it wasn't for Prince, if it wasn't for what you guys did, I wouldn't have been inspired to do this. Most of the artists out there respected Prince, the ones that were happening at the time and the future artists since then. I get that all the time from people. He really was really a great inspiration.
We're recording this in Rochester, Minnesota, with an emerging live music scene. Why is it important for communities to invest in arts and culture?
Because it brings people together from all walks of life and diversity of ethnicities. And I really believe it unites people more than anything. And it brings positivity and compassion and empathy into the world, the messages that come through our music. So it's very important.
Looking back on your career, what are you most proud of?
Well, first, just having the pure luck to be connected to a guy like Prince. But, you know, after I left Prince, because of what I learned, my career has been very diverse. I've done a lot of different things. I worked as a producer for a local record label for several years, and then I worked for some video game companies doing music for them. I even did sound design and music for some slot machine games for several years in casinos. You can hear my voice on some of them too, because I did voiceover work on there. I had my wife who's in here too. She did some voiceover work with me as well. And she's a great lyricist. She worked on my album back in the day too, Andra. So I'd like to thank her for inspiring me and supporting me as well.
Well, you have a great family, and I've met Andra many times, and your sons, and your oldest son, Max, is in the biz, right?
Yes, my oldest son is an aspiring producer, and he's doing quite well these days. Gets to work with a lot of people. He was working on something for Wiz Khalifa just the other day.
Really?
Yeah, he's
Very cool.
out there doing stuff. Yeah. And he's got some solo material out currently. You can catch it on Spotify. It's his artist name is I.M.Max, so spelled I, then A.M., then Max, with the dots in between.
And he's in Minnesota as well.
He's based here now. He lived out in L.A. for about 8.5 years, and then he moved back a couple years ago.
If you could share one lesson you've learned from a lifetime in music, what would it be?
To just follow your heart. If you're an aspiring artist, write your music from the heart, and just whatever message you want to put it across as best you can. That's the only thing I can say. Don't force it, and just try to entertain people.
Matt Fink, Dr. Fink, thank you for joining us, for sharing your remarkable journey with us today. We appreciate your openness, your stories, and the perspective you've given us on music, creativity, and the legacy of Prince and the Revolution. Congratulations on an extraordinary career, and thank you for being part of this special 100th episode of the Growing Destinations podcast.
Thank you. Hey, do you mind if I just promote a couple shows I'm doing?
Yes, please.
Too,
Yes.
We have a group from Minneapolis and other people who are out of town in the band, and these are all Prince alumni members, and we're called St. Paul and the Minneapolis Funk All-Stars. St. Paul was the name given to Paul Peterson when the album for The Family was produced. Paul was the front man, and Wendy Melvoin's sister Susanna was in The Family back in the day. But we're performing around Minneapolis and around the country this year, and you can catch where we're performing on St. Paul and the Minneapolis Funk Allstars.com.
Sounds great, and hopefully we'll get him to Rochester soon.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
Before we wrap up, I'd like to invite my colleague and co-producer of the Growing Destinations podcast, Erin O'Brien, to join me on mic. Erin has been a key part of bringing these conversations to life, and I'd like to ask her to share a few reflections on our journey through the first 100 episodes. Erin, welcome to the Growing Destinations podcast. Kind of weird to say that to you.
Well, thanks for having me on, and happy 100.
You've been part of this podcast since the beginning. When you look back over 100 episodes, what stands out to you the most?
What stands out to me is, with the title of the podcast, Growing Destinations, a lot of the focus might be on the destination part. But for me, looking back on the 100 episodes that we've produced, one thing that I've noticed is that there's so much growth in so many different ways. And that's a different way of looking at the title of the podcast, Growing Destinations. We've covered people with personal growth in their career, creative growth through artists' leadership at all stages, whether it's college students performing an internship or CEOs. There's growth of all kinds. So anyone can be a community builder. Anyone can help grow their community. That's one thing that I've taken from these past 100 episodes.
What stands out to me is the fact that when we started this podcast, we were wearing masks. We were in a COVID environment, and a lot of the interviews were around recovery from COVID or pivots. So that kind of stands out to me. And then fast forward to now, and you're right, the businesses that are thriving, or because of COVID, even some businesses that have thrived. So it's really interesting, just the trajectory of this podcast from day one until now. Over the past 100 episodes, we've heard so many incredible stories and met some remarkable people. Is there a particular conversation, story, or moment that has stayed with you?
One conversation that really stuck out to me was our podcast with Chuck Sibley, the KTTC chief photojournalist of 50 plus years, being a former colleague of his. Learning his story over the years working with him has always been an inspiration to me. And so then being able to sit down and hear his recollections over the podcast, I still learned things about him. He had such a fascinating career, and one that I really admire.
I've really enjoyed the diversity we've had of people we've talked to, quite a few musicians, which is always inspiring to learn what, got them interested in music, and then fast forward to leading a band or leading a group. I think for me, one person that I remember and it's so great to see his growth is Seamus Kolb from Carol's Corn. He started when he was a teenager working for the former owner, and he had always had a touch point. And then when COVID hit, he was working for him and became owner during COVID. And now he's in every Shields store in America and many retailers around the upper Midwest. And he just acquired a larger building for production. So that really stands out to me from, when we interviewed him and then fast forward to today. It's quite remarkable.
Yeah, it's really cool to see these people continuing to grow and do great things for the community.
Well, as we look to the next 100 episodes, any topics come to mind for you?
One topic that I always love hearing about is entrepreneurism. I love seeing people follow their dreams, do great things. Some entrepreneurs in the past that we've covered, like Sarah Richardson, Neighborly Gifts, she turned a simple idea of creating locally sourced Easter baskets into something much bigger, corporate gifting. Things like that are really inspiring to me, and I hope we continue to cover some of those stories.
Well, I'm sure we will. Erin, it's been great to have you be part of this journey with me, and onward to 101.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Growing Destinations, brought to you by Experience Rochester. If you enjoyed today's episode, subscribe, leave a review, and share it. And if you're planning your next getaway, weekend trip, or conference destination, discover everything happening in Rochester, Minnesota. Because this isn't the Rochester you think you know. This is Rochester, really. Learn more at experiencerochestermn.com.